Thank you very much to the Korean Press Foundation for inviting me to its second journalism conference in Seoul. It is an honor to be here. I will try to respond to the question you posed to me. How will technology change journalism? Digital technologies have already led journalism to a lot of changes in many ways. More changes are en route or about to start, since we are still in the early stages of the digital age. Changes are vital for journalism survival in the new era. However, as we talk about changes, it is also very important to keep in mind that we need to preserve journalism's fundamental values. That is equally vital to survival. I was glad to see that the Korean Press Foundation invited Tom Rosental to this conference. I believe his visionary work with Bill Kovacs at the turn of the century is an evergreen explanation of those fundamental values that don't need to be changed. They can evolve and adapt, as Tom explained yesterday. Tom knows how enthusiastic I was with his book, The Elements of Journalism, that he and Bill launched in 2001. By then, it was already clear to me that we were entering a turbulent period of radical transformations in the media environment that would include confusion about what journalism is and what may look like journalism but is not. The Elements of Journalism has shed light into the darkness of that persistent confusion. When I started my career 50 years ago, there was no confusion. We all knew what journalism was in a democratic society, and we took for granted that our audiences would also know that. In 1968, when I was a teenager rookie reporter in Rio de Janeiro, my hometown in Brazil, we were living in the climax of electronic media, the electronic media era. The newspaper had survived the arrival of the radio and was dealing with the impact of television. Journalists were the gatekeepers for the news and information that people consumed. 30 years ago, as a Nieman Fellow at Harvard University, I learned that a digital revolution was upon us. It was a memorable aha moment for me. I have never stopped thinking about how much digital technology would impact journalism and force it to change to survive. Sorry for mentioning anniversaries, but indulge me to add a last one. 20 years ago, I started teaching the first course on online journalism at the University of Texas at Austin. I also became then a digital evangelizer of sorts, preaching in newsrooms and universities around the world about the upcoming changes technology would impose on journalism. Perhaps the most important lesson that I have learned during those years of digital evangelization is this: to understand how technologies will continue changing journalism, we first need to carefully recognize the broader context, the revolutionary dimensions of the shift from the industrial era to the digital era. Since the popularization of the web in mid-1990s, most media executives have acted as if their news companies could survive the impact of the digital competitors by way of small changes and adaptations. It was as if they were playing by the book Mediamorphosis, Understanding the New Media, written by Roger Fiedler and published in 1997. Part of a series called Journalism and Communication for a New Century, the book seemed to give comfort to publishers who were minimizing the effects of the internet. Fiedler called mediamorphosis a process of adaptations that old media adopted during the 20th century each time a new medium arrived. He warned that the only alternative to mediamorphosis was the death of old media. The conclusion was that history had shown that new media does not kill old media if that mediamorphosis occurs. I was fascinated by Fiedler's book, but at an academic conference in 1999 and later in an article for a British journal, I came up with a counterpoint and another neologism, mediacide, with the same suffix as homicide or suicide. I felt that mediamorphosis was a correct explanation of the changes old media had to adopt to survive the arrival of new media during the 20th century, but would not work in the 21st century. The World Wide Web was mistakenly seen as just a new medium. In the same way, the radio did not kill the newspaper as predicted, and the television did not kill the radio as also predicted. Now the www would not kill the old media. The problem was that the internet was not just a new medium, but rather the tip of the iceberg of something much bigger. The digital revolution would be a long, transformational, and profoundly disruptive process with few parallels in humanity's history, such as the written word in ancient Greece, the Gutenberg press, and the Industrial Revolution. What the digital revolution was about to provoke, I argued, was a media side, the killing of the media ecosystem of the industrial era and the birth of a new media ecosystem radically different from the previous one. Isn't precisely what we have been witnessing? Isn't the media ecosystem of the last century being actually destroyed by the digital revolution? Aren't we already in a radically different media environment? In the wake of the web, we have seen the advent of mobile devices, the giant tech platforms with their powerful algorithms, the boom of social media, big data, artificial intelligence, and machine learning, etc. The digital revolution has already transformed the media ecosystem into a different environment, and the changes are still going on. To stay in the same print media example, let me make a proclamation here. The newspaper is dead. Long live the newspaper. The digital technologies have provoked so many changes that the newspaper, as we knew it during the last century, does not exist anymore. The old monomedia product is now a multimedia service. New storytelling techniques have been adopted. The news gathering, processing, and distribution methods have changed and will continue to change the newspaper. Similarly, journalism in radio and television have been changing to survive the new media ecosystem created by the digital revolution. The Boundaries that separated, sorry, the boundaries that separated media formats have been blurring, forcing journalism to change. It is an ongoing process, and we are living in a dual world during this transition, as the old and the new are mixed up. But it is obvious that the changes are profound and guided not only by the media desire to embrace new technologies, but rather it is guided by how people are using those new technologies to consume, produce, and distribute information. For around 15 years, I have shown two pictures to make the point of the radical differences between the old industrial media ecosystem and the new digital media ecosystem. The analogy between biological ecosystems and networked computer environments has been used before, so I applied that as a metaphor to explain the new media ecosystem that is emerging. The first photo shows a scene of a desert-like biological ecosystem with several cactuses and dried bushes where just a few species can survive. That environment, low in biodiversity, based on scarcity, represents well the previous media ecosystem, where news organizations were gatekeepers. An amorphous, inactive mass audience had virtually no way to speak back to journalists. People could not communicate to each other in a massive way. The second photo shows a lavish scene of a rainforest biological ecosystem with big trees, a lot of water, aquatic vegetation, sunshine, where many species can proliferate. That environment, high in biodiversity, based on abundance, represents well the emerging media ecosystem, where the gatekeeper role of news organizations was drastically reduced. Instead of the amorphous, inactive mass audience, now people have many options to receive and even to produce and distribute information. And not only can individuals speak back to journalists, but they can create their own audiences. We have moved from a media-centric communication system to an I, as an individual or myself, I-centric ecosystem with the empowerment of individuals and non-media organizations that have become media. It's a disintermediation process that is going on. The ongoing digital deluge has created this rainforest-like media ecosystem, and journalism must continue to change to survive, because we all know that the cactus dies drowned in the rainforest. The New York Times has been among media companies that get it. Its 2014 100-page internal report, Innovation, calls for a profound change in the culture of the newspaper, as it needs to move from a print-based operation and become more focused on digital. The Times report is in part based on another book published also in 1997, The Innovator's Dilemma. The author, Harvard Business School professor Clayton Christensen, developed a theory to explain why leading companies that confront innovative disruption usually lose to startups that launch products based on disruptive technologies that are typically cheaper, smaller, and frequently more convenient to use. When we think about how journalism needs to change, it is important to consider innovation and entrepreneurship. Christensen says that there are sustaining technologies and disruptive technologies. The first ones bring incremental improvements, while the latter introduce new products that are usually cheaper. While incumbent leaders are improving their products or services, disruptors offer competition of inferior quality, but that eventually improve and wins the market. The innovation report warned that the New York Times had been playing as a typical incumbent leader described by Christensen's book, just trying to optimize what the newspaper had already been doing. Instead, the innovation reporter said, it should happen a cultural change in the company to foster this disruptive innovation. Instead of waiting for being disrupted, the New York Times should play a role of this disruptor. In addition, it pointed to a series of news startups that journalists in the New York Times were laughing at because they were so small or stealing the news, etc. And the report said that the New York Times should take those small competitors seriously, although they were still small and their offer of news and information was inferior. Last year, the Times issued another internal report to measure the progress and that it had achieved so far to change its corporate and newsroom cultures. It gave itself a mixed grade, asking for more effort towards innovation and entrepreneurship, or intrapreneurship in the case of internal innovations. Another great American newspaper, the Washington Post, has also become an example of deliberate cultural change that favor innovation while keeping alive the basic elements of journalism. Perhaps the most important change digital technologies are imposing on journalism is that cultural shift. Following my same metaphor, the culture of the desert needs to evolve into the culture of the rainforest. The culture of scarcity needs to evolve into the culture of abundance. In a world where billions of people have in the palm of their hands a device that is a gateway to an unlimited amount of information at any time from anywhere. It is not easy to move to this new media ecosystem. The most drastic impact of the media side has been the destruction of the traditional ways to finance journalism through business models based on advertising. In the United States, in a little more than a decade, the newspaper's advertising revenue dropped from $50 billion to $17 billion or less. So news organizations have been trying to change their business models and look for new revenue streams. The New York Times experiments with new businesses that would have certainly been ignored in the past, like selling wine, organizing tours around the world where you can travel with New York Times journalists and correspondents, hosting events, and even delivering food at readers' doorsteps, meal kits of its famous cooking sections. Who could imagine that the New York Times would be in the business of delivering food? The product recommendation website Wirecutter was acquired by the New York Times for $30 million and now have been integrated to the New York Times to generate revenue from referral fees when readers purchase recommended products or services. The most important change of the Times business model has been its successful paywall, which was launched in 2011 and became the envy of newspapers everywhere. The Times has now 2.9 million digital-only subscribers and 900,000 print subscribers. Subscriptions represent now 2/3 of the company's overall revenue. It was in the United States, the finance of a newspaper company was, until a couple of decades ago, 80% coming from advertising and 20% or less coming from subscriptions or sales. And now it's becoming more and more depending on the readers. The Washington Post also has been successful with its aggressive moves to digital subscription, reaching more than 1 million subscribers last year. I remember the editor telling me, what about having $100 million revenue suddenly coming from this million subscribers with an average price of $100 per year. But both newspapers have not given up of advertising. Advertising is not dead, but its participation is shrinking because all the money goes to Google and Facebook and other platforms. So the Washington Post has just created a user lab to study how to create new formats of ads that are user-friendly. Unfortunately, the subscription success of the Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal is an exception in the devastated newspaper market in the United States. The only metropolitan newspapers that I know of that have been reasonably successful with paywalls are the Los Angeles Times and the Boston Globe. There is no sign that the paywalls are working for the rest of the newspapers in the country. Most American newspapers are not only incapable of replicating successful paywalls, but they face another problem. They seem to be consolidating under the control of new owners, who are hedge funds and equity funds that are more interested in short-term results than in changes that could allow journalism to survive in the long term. They want to, those hedge funds that are buying newspaper companies for very low value, you know, a newspaper company about 13 years ago would value 13 EBITDA, which is the annual profit. 10 years ago, it was 5. 5, the equivalent of what they could profit in a year 5 times. Now it's 3. So, you know, the value of newspaper companies was devaluated a lot. So those investors from Wall Street are buying the newspapers. And they just want to recover their investment as soon as possible and collect lost profit on their way out. Their business model has been based on cutting costs, which is obviously a finite business model. A new study has just shown that 1,800 newspapers, 20% of the total, have shut down in the US since 2004. Without newspapers, many regions in the country are now defined as news deserts. The same study shows newspapers that became sort of ghosts. The study referred to them as ghost papers because they are a fraction of what they were years ago. This map shows some of these so-called news deserts. Newsrooms that had 300 journalists now have 30. Newsrooms that had 30 now have 3. And you would ask, how can you do a newspaper with 3 people in the newsroom? Those hedge funds are being very keen in creating hubs, news and design centers that produce the same pages for 200 newspapers. So, you know, the local participation and original creation has diminished drastically. The total number of journalists in newsrooms has declined from 72,000 in around 2004 to 39,000 in 2017. Well, there is hope, though. The changes in journalism that come in direct response to new technologies and new consumers' habits are happening in innovative news startups that have been popping up all over the world. Many of these new species entering the rainforest-like media ecosystem are also non-profit journalism, which is another phenomenon in the United States. Since the profitability of journalism has declined so much, there are many organizations being created that are not looking for profit, but to create public journalism to serve a community, and taking advantage of 2 important factors of the United States. One is the tradition of philanthropy, the give back, which is one of the most beautiful things for me in the United States, and the other, some tax incentive that exists for people who give money, especially very rich people. So, in the United States, the Institute for Nonprofit News has more than 180 members spread all over this Google map here. Those are news startups that have been created around the country, and this year they will have a total revenue of $350 million. Non-profit journalism organizations like ProPublica that we are going to hear about, or Civil Foundation that also we're going to hear about this morning here, are creating new models that are more compatible with the new media ecosystem that I have been trying to describe here. The native digital Texas Tribune is a great example of innovative nonprofit journalism. I have been on its board of directors since the launch 9 years ago, so I could follow from inside the development and the growth of a new kind of public interest journalism. It is a combination of old good reporting, innovative use of digital technologies, and new ways to develop and engage audiences. The Tribune changed the way to cover politics and public policy in Texas. And it is so successful also as a business, with a business model of diversified revenue streams. If the Texas Tribune, we were a for-profit company, we were being profitable in the last 5 years. Innovative and entrepreneurial journalists are everywhere in the world, leading the changes that will make journalism survive and thrive. There are many examples. In Brazil, my home country, a reporter was fired in a laid-off of the largest newspaper in the country, and 5 minutes after I heard, I sent him an email saying, "Fernando, it was the hand of God. You are fully equipped to create a political.com of Brazil. Go for it." And he did not follow exactly my advice, but he was more creative. Instead of looking to the United States for a model, he launched a paid newsletter called Drive Premium in English that covers insight and political power in the capital city of Brazil, distributed 3 times per day via email and WhatsApp. In a little more than 2 years, he made enough money to hire more than 30 journalists and to launch a news website that reaches now 5 million users per month. Recently, he also founded a public opinion poll business. In Spain, while traditional newspapers shrink, a small news website has been growing steadily. The eldiario.es jumped from 2 million unique users per month in 2013 to 14 million this year, with a business model based on membership, a new kind of, not subscription, but membership, a new kind of relationship with readers. The website is open to anyone, but more than 35,000 members pay a monthly fee, which makes the site sustainable. And it's not a non-profit, it's a for-profit organization with a radical transparency about the way they work, about what they do with the money, etc. In the Netherlands, the correspondent is an even bigger example of innovative news site that created a new kind of relationship with readers. 61,000 members monthly pay to get news from a company that also innovated on another aspect. It sets a limit to its profits, and it doesn't accept advertisement. They are about to launch their operation in the United States called The Correspondent, and there is a little bit of buzz and expectation about how they would make there. In Switzerland, Republik is an ads-free investigative journalism site based on membership model, with 22,000 people paying an annual fee to participate in the readers' community and to attend special events. Journalism is changing within and outside traditional media companies. The news business is just in a transitional period, moving from the desert to the rainforest. Revolutions destroy things much faster than they build new ones, as NYU professor Clay Shirky reminded us in his seminal article or blog post of 2009, Newspapers and Thinking the Unthinkable. Revolutions also create a period of chaos and confusion, as we are facing now in the media environment. The good news is that after the storm comes the calm. The storm will pass and journalism will survive stronger. Technologies create problems and humans create solutions for those problems. Journalists all over the world are innovating and creating solutions to the adversities of the new media ecosystem that has emerged from the digital revolution. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. While you send your questions, I want just to mention, if you can put my slide back, I organized a conference in Austin called ISOJ, International Symposium on Online Journalism, and the Korean Press Foundation has been sending people to participate in that conference, and next year I will celebrate the 20th anniversary of that conference. So here's an invitation for you to come back. And the night center that I created in the University of Texas, we do online courses. We have reached more than 160,000 people in 180 countries around the world with journalism training, mostly explaining how to move from the desert to the rainforest, how to adopt cutting-edge digital technologies to improve the quality of journalism. So I invite you to participate in those free courses.
네, 뜻깊은 강의해 주신 로젠탈 알브스 교수님께 감사드립니다. 이어서 질의응답 시간을 갖도록 하겠습니다. 모바일로 저희가 접수받은 몇 가지 질문을 선별해서 진행하도록 하겠는데요. 첫 번째 질문 보시겠습니다. 신문을 중심으로 말씀을 해주셨는데 미국의 방송 환경은 신문과 같은 변화가 많지 않나요? 또 미국과는 환경이 많이 다른 한국에서 디지털 전략을 차용한다면 어떤 전략이 가장 활용하기 좋을까요? 여기서 기자들이 가져야 할 마음가짐이나 태도가 있다면 어떤 게 가장 필요할까요?
Thank you for this excellent question. Yes, I used to say that I don't have blood in my veins. I have ink. I'm a newspaper man. I come from newspaper. So I'm totally newspaper biased. So I focus more on newspapers. But the environmental change in media is not exclusive of print media. On the contrary, another book that I could mention is a book from 1990 called Life After Television. In 1990, in the end of the 80s, people were looking into the future of technology, and Americans were very afraid of the Japanese because the Japanese were ahead, and they were afraid of high-definition television. And this guy wrote a book saying, forget about high-definition television. What it will change the world of television is telecomputing, the fact that computers will be networked and nobody would be dependent on broadcast as they are now. So instead of being concerned about high-resolution television, you should be putting fiber optics all over the country. So this is coming. This is what is going on now. We have never watched more videos in our history, but we have never watched less television also. Cable television in the United States, the cutting the cord has been a very strong movement. So what is changing now is Netflix, for example, is streaming, is the phenomenon of YouTube. Yesterday we heard Irene talking about the opportunities on YouTube. So broadcast will be the next. I think the impact, if you want to see what is going to happen with the broadcast, it's a good thing to look at what is going on with print media now. And the changes are not imposed from above. The changes are from the bottom, from people, from us, from the kids, from the 15-year-old girl who goes to a drugstore and buy makeup and suddenly has 5 million viewers and is making a lot of money just with a video blog. Those kinds of things are the disruption that is going on. And you know, I recommend not only that book, Innovator's Dilemma, but the other two that were published from the same author, The Innovator's Solution and the Innovator's DNA.
네, 두 번째 질문입니다. 기존 미디어의 문화를 바꾸는 건 매우 어려운 일입니다. 교육을 통해서도 한계가 있고요. 디지털 미디어 생태계로의 문화를 바꾸기 위한 방법상 조언을 부탁드립니다.
Yes, it is really very difficult to change the culture. In the second book of Clay Christensen, he says, he dedicates 2 or 3 pages to the newspaper case. Here I am again talking about newspaper. But basically what he says is almost like you should give up of changing the culture. You should create a new business outside the old culture and let that other company kind of attack the traditional company. I have been disagreeing with this for years because I do believe in changes of culture. I do believe in the effort, and that's why I was mentioning the New York Times effort that many media companies around the world are doing to change the culture from inside. I mean, the option is very easy. I mean, or you change or you die. But it's not easy because you, for example, in the classifieds business, the newspaper industry saw that Craigslist was doing, and we all blame the newspapers for not doing anything to combat that. But what they could do, that was a destruction of value. Of what was sold by the newspaper, offered by for free. So I believe that is a constant education and effort from inside. There is a great article from the same Christensen in the Neiman Reports magazine that you can find online that he says, be the disruptor. And this is the message for the media companies. Understand the change in the media ecosystem and try to be the disruptor.